Test. Alrighty. Hey, what's going on, guys? For everybody that's tuning in, both live and in the replay, just making sure everything is up and running. Looks like it. Test. Alrighty. Hey, what's going on, guys? For everybody that's tuning in, both live and in the replay. Alrighty. So today's stream is. Oh, let me mute myself over there. Today's stream, we're going to be going over how to prepare for your Lichess weekly opponent. And I'm actually participating in the rapid battle right now, so I'm going to use that this week's opponent as an example. It's a little bit extra work for preparing for the rapid battle because you play both black and the white pieces, but we'll go over the simple way to just prepare for your opponent, especially when you know you're just playing one color or the other. So let me just pull up. Alrighty, so starting off, I have our little list of 10 steps to follow here. I'm just going to use this last week. I was an alternate to finish off the week 8 in the last week of the season for the Lichess4545 League. I ended up filling in for both boards 2 and 3 this past week for the Blunder Buddies. So pretty much we'll get right into it. Your first step is to see who your opponent is playing, kind of write that name down somewhere, and see what color you're playing. Those are your first two steps here on the guide to success for doing well and preparing. One of my tips that I threw in here, I feel like I see this way too often. Obviously, everyone's schedule is different, but I recommend if you have the opportunity to schedule your game for maybe like Thursday or later on in the week. This allows you to prep for your game more so. I see people kind of rush into their game right off the bat. I mean, if that's the only time that you can play your game, like the Monday or the Tuesday that the pairings come out, then you got to do what you got to do. But for any sort of practice and training, you're going to want to give yourself a couple days of looking over your study material that we'll get to here in a little bit. So obviously for the league or the Lonewolf League, it's a little bit simpler. Like, like I'm going to have the white pieces against PSQ, and you only have to focus on that one color for that specific week. So it makes it super simple as you're going into your opening prep each week. That's true. That's true. But maybe we're kind of betting that our opponent's not going to do as much work as us either. So the goal for this opening prep, obviously, you can go into it and see if they're not prepped either. But the goal is to have a comfortable game. I mean, these are long classical games, so I try to take these kind of seriously. It also helps like just confirm my own personal opening repertoire and kind of fine tune it myself. So for this example, I'm going to kind of go over, this is my opponent for this week in the Rapid. So I would just kind of show you how I would prepare for this guy named Kobri. So for Rapid, you play both the black and the white pieces, so we'll go over both. The 3 free resources that I suggest everybody use when prepping is, obviously, one is your Lichess. Everyone's going to have a Lichess account. 2 is openingtree.com. Super powerful tool, and we're going to dive into this more here in a second. And then Chessable, I believe even a free Chessable account is still okay to use. I do pay for the premium, but I believe the free Chessable allows you to make your own private courses still as well. And so we'll dive into more of how to use all 3 of these together to kind of build out your opening prep for the week. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to openingtree.com, and you're going to see something that kind of looks like this. When you first get there, we want to click lichess.org because that's the site that we're playing on, and that's where all of our usernames are going to be. I'm going to input my opponent's name, and then normally you would know if you were white or black. So if I was going to be playing against Kuberti this week and I knew I was going to be the black pieces, well, then I would want to see all of his white games, and vice versa. If I knew I was going to have the white pieces, I would want to see all of his black games. So, I mean, let's start with I'm going to be playing in both colors. So I'll start with him playing black. And after you fill out these top sections, you click Analyze, and it's just going to start loading all of the games up into openingtree.com. And depending on, obviously, the more games your opponent has, the more data you're going to get. If someone doesn't have a lot of games, then, I mean, you're just going to have to do your own kind of opening prep yourself and whenever you feel comfortable playing. So we're already on step 4. We have all of our opening resources opened up at the top here. I have a dual monitor, so sometimes I have the analysis board on one side and the opening tree on the other to kind of go in tandem with each other. And you'll kind of see how we use both of them here. So right now, we're loading all of the games that Kuberi has played black as. So these moves, these arrows that you're seeing for the white pieces, are all the opening moves that he's faced when he's played black. So while we're waiting for these games to load, it's kind of important, no matter like what your elo range is to have like your own baseline opening prep. Like, do you like to play e4? Do you like to play e5? Sorry, e4, d4, like c4? Are you a knight f3 player? G3? You kind of have to have like the openings that you like to play already, and we're just trying to fine tune those openings against what our opponent like responds with. I don't really recommend like play if you're an e4 player, like all of a sudden jumping way over to d4 just because maybe you see something that your opponent does not so well against, as you're not going to be comfortable with those middle games and early to middle games, and probably going to blunder, higher chance of blundering out of the opening. So I'm personally a 1e4 player, so if I'm looking at Kuberti's black games, I put in 1e4. We go over to the second tab here, and I can look at what he plays in response. So I see he almost has 700 games of e5 and about 300 games of c5. So e4, e5, or he likes to go for the Sicilian with c5. C6, it looks like, would be his next most played, and that's the Caro-Kann, obviously. It's important to look on opening tree, like when you're importing all of these games, you hover your cursor over this little eyeball, or this eye, and you look at the bottom there, it says last played. I find that super important. Sometimes you're going to see maybe he's played an even amount of games. Let's say he's played e5, he's played c5, and they were about equal amount of games played for each. Well, then I want to see like what is his most played maybe recently. Like obviously he can make prep for me, and that's why we're not going to go super deep on the lines that we kind of create for ourselves. But if I see that maybe he has a lot of e5 games, but he hasn't played e5 in 2 years, well, probably not going to be expecting e5. But I see he played some games with e5 2 days ago, and c5. He hasn't played a c5 game in over it looks like over a month. So I might do a little bit of c5 prep, but I would probably not worry about it too much. And then c6, doesn't hurt to look here. He hasn't played c6, the Caro-Kann, in over, looks like over a year. And these other ones, looks like it's just kind of offbeat stuff and everything, multiple months that he hasn't played it. So e5, c5 seems like the most what I'm going to be facing when I play white against black. So I'll put in e5. And now I normally play a very Italian setup. I go for either the Evans Gambit, Scotch Gambit, or some sort of... So I always play knight f3, so input your move, whatever that may be. Again, we look to see what his most played is. And it looks like he is going to be playing knight to c6. So I'm very comfortable with that. I input my third move here. And so this is usually the setup I go for as white. I see that he likes to play the Italian game and a little bit of the two knights. He hasn't He played the two nights last month, but he's played c5 literally last month. So my opening prep from right here is I want to see what he does, especially as the white side of the pieces. What he does when I play the opening I want. So this is exactly what I want to be in, and I always play b4 personally. And so this is really where you're going to get a lot of use out of things like opening tree. As you can see further down the line or at the critical points, how does my opponent respond? Does he respond well? Does he respond poorly? And you can kind of make a game plan from there. So I can see that he has, against the Evans Gambit, he's accepted it 6 times and he's declined it 4 times. Obviously 10 games isn't a lot, but the fact that there's a lot of different variations that the Evans can go down, I can all of a sudden start lowering the amount of study work that I have to do. So first off, again, we would look to see if any of these are kind of recent. Looks like he's declined it more recently than accepted. But I would probably take a look at both of these types of games. So the accepted is this, and then this is another branching off point. There's 3 different Evans lines that he can go into. Obviously, you kind of have to know your opening that you're trying to push the game towards. I find a lot of success in the Evans Gambit myself. I sit for Rapid and Classical right between the 1900 and 2000 range on Lichess, and I have a good amount of success with it. So this allows me to kind of cut down my study work greatly. So instead of having to look at bishop to c5 lines, I can cut all that opening out of my study time. Bishop to e7 he's played once, and if I really wanted to, I could click on it to see when he played that game, or I could look at bishop a5. So this is, and all of a sudden we're already out of my personal opening prep as the courses I follow, I castle right here. So I just kind of know that I'm going to get a favorable game, or at least a comfortable game for myself with the accepted line. And so one thing I would do, as you can see on my Chessable dashboard, is I created this private chess study. These were lines that I had created for the last 2 opponents, or last 3 opponents, I should say. These first 4 or 5 were for my rapid game, and then the 2 classical games that I played were down here. I paused them since I don't really need those variations anymore. After you create, so let's say you could create a new chapter for each opponent if you really wanted to, or I'm just going to put it all in the same chapter. You go down to here to add variation, and from here I would just input the variation that I would want to study, and I know that my opponent is going to go for something like this. And so I would input this depending on, like I said, he doesn't have any lines where his opponent castles, so there's not really too much more opening prep I can go from there. I would save this line into my book. So normally you'd come down here, Lichess4545 prep. You could name it. The only reason I'm not going to save this one specifically is because in my chessable courses, I'm just going to go to my Evans Gambit class, and I'm going to study my bishop to a5 lines. So if you have a course that kind of goes over a certain line specifically, thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it. Sorry if I'm not looking at chat too often, but thanks for everyone stopping in. So I have a course, obviously, on the Evans Gambit, and it goes over this bishop to a5 line. So I would probably focus on a heavy study of that, as well as the decline variations. So 18 different variations, and I would hammer those, all the way up until Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, depending on which day I scheduled my game. For this rapid tournament, so for the Lonewolf or like the Lichess4545, you probably only have to really prepare for maybe two different like openings. So it looks like from his opening tree, I'm going to get an Italian, and obviously I'm the one that gets to choose if we go into an Evans or not. And the other option we saw from here was maybe I would look at what he does. So I play the Smith Mora, and I would look to see what he plays against the Smith Mora, as I'm going to have 2 white games against him in this rapid tournament that's going on with Lichess, or Lichess4545. But it also doesn't hurt to be prepared for if they have, let's say they had equal number of E5 games, equal number of C5 games. Well, you're going to have a little bit of opening prep for both of those and just kind of be ready. So it just depends on, he played this a month ago, so he could easily pull out a Sicilian. And I can already look to see what he plays. So he plays E5, which is normally known as a mistake. And then I look at my other resources. So I personally have Mayhem in the Mora by Mark Esserman, the Bible when it comes to the Smith Mora Gambit. Let's say you didn't have like the book Mayhem in the Mora, or you didn't have an opening guide on Chessable. You're just using it for free. First off, there's a lot of free opening guides on Chessable, so take advantage of those. But at the same time, you could go right into your Lichess analysis board. So let's go over that Smith Mora line. Let's say I didn't have the book Mayhem in the Mora. Well, I just saw that my opponent plays E5, so I'd kind of tick back here. And I would turn on, obviously I'd turn on the analysis. And if there's any like crazy discrepancy, that would be the line that I would probably try to go towards. As well as this opening book. That's a good way right now. Let's say you kind of get towards the end of a line and you kind of want to see like where that line could head. The opening book is huge on Lichess. The database is massive. So I could see here 3 of his opponents played knight f3. He's going to play knight c6. And we could kind of go from there. Again, I believe in Mayhem in the Mora, the correct line is getting the bishop and the queen out early for some early pressure. But I would have to go and kind of look and do my research on that Mora. So I would use the book, I would use my Chessable courses, and kind of put together a game plan. And that would all go into my Lichess45 prep. So like I said, last week I played Alex Gall in the Rapid tournament. And we ended up playing, he plays E45, Sicilian, Caro Kann. We ended up playing a bunch of different openings as our match went for 6 games. We went into tiebreakers. And I got to use a decent amount of this prep. The more decline lines, I had 2 different more decline lines that he played against. An Evans Gambit line that I don't believe we ended up diving into. Scotch Gambit line and a Scorpion Horus Gambit. That's against the Caro Kann. Again, if one of my favorite openings against the Caro Kann. And I had some prep for that. I had gone over this opening myself personally. It's a line that's seen less than like 0.01% of times against the Caro Kann. So against amateur and club level players, it scores fairly well. 54% for white, 42% for black. Little tip. We give up a pawn for major development and attacking on black's king. But anyways, that's not the point here. So by using opening tree, we can kind of see what we want to play for the white side. So it looks like I'm going to be facing a Smith Mora accepted with E5. I'm going to go research my book, input those lines, and add those to my study. Or an Evans Gambit accepted and declined. And I'll just use the course by National Master Hans Schutt. Another tip, this if you're on Chessable, the courses created by this guy, National Master Hans Schutt, are amazing for, I would say, like intermediate to advanced intermediate players, even beginners. These courses on Chessable are usually like way too many lines. As you can see, this Evans Gambit course itself only has maybe 40 lines in it. It has tactics in it. He makes them super digestible. That's where I get all my prep for my Evans Gambit, Scotch Gambit. He even has a Sicilian dragon, what to play against the French defense. Yubal's an Italian opening, and a bunch of different other stuff. Huge. Can't praise this guy enough. And like most of his courses are $5. Like that's it. So that's what we saw from the white side of the pieces when we would be playing white. In order to flip it around, I can just go back, click white, and we can start analyzing what to play for as black. Again, you're going to want to have a few different ideas already. So I mainly play the Caro-Kann against e4, and I've been starting my study on the Slav defense against d4. And that's the Caro-Kann and the Dynamic Slav. Both of those are opening lines that I've been studying from the guys over at Chess Goals. Another great resource if you need opening repertoire and preparation for at a very baseline and like a good like intermediate level. Very digestible. So again, we look over here. Again, this is so we're going to see d4, e4 are about the same. So this is where it's really important to kind of see where our opponent. So I'm going to have to be prepared for both d4 and e4. It looks like he's played both of these lines fairly recently. If I really wanted to, I could cut it down. Like you can, there's advanced filters here. If you didn't want to see, let's say, his bullet games, ultra bullet, correspondence, you could take those off to see if like he plays different things in classical compared to rapid and vice versa. So for this type of opponent, you're going to have to be prepared for, it looks like at e4 and d4. So against e4, I would just play the initial Caro-Kann moves. And it looks like he plays the advanced. I play the c5 variation, and then I could kind of see knight f3. This is the continuation that's in my book, so I know I'm going to be comfortable in any of the Caro-Kann games that we play. And then against d4, I would see what he does. So he plays c4. I play the Slav. Triangle setup. And I could see kind of what he plays against the triangle setup and go from there. So I would use this information, again, diving into my opening prep, either already on Chessable or by using the Lichess4545, or the Lichess analysis board, I should say, in order to, see, the C5 has definitely been the move in the recent years going forward for the advanced variation. So, if, like I said, if you're not going to be paying for like Chessable courses or books, that's totally fine. You should have some sort of idea of like your opening preparation already, like the lines that you like to play in just random games on Lichess or chess.com, whatever your preferred site is. You know, we all have openings that we try to push the game towards. So you kind of have those ideas beforehand, and then you kind of mold them to see if you can either find a line where your opponent seems to make a big misstep, or vice versa. You can kind of look here as well. It shows you how they score. So when he plays e3, black is winning 8. It looks like some of these games kind of go, it shows 11, 12 games there, even though it only shows 6. So it looks like some of those games are transpositions to other games. And if you kept playing the moves, it'll keep adding those games. So if he plays e3, he doesn't do very well against e3. Against g3, maybe I would study a little bit more and do my prep. So against this is the opening prep that I know. He doesn't have any games in it, so I already know by move 5 I'm gonna have my opponent already out of book, which is good for me, especially if I know a few more lines. So like in the Dynamic Slav course, saw that after d4, d5, he played knight f3, knight f3 in here, and, well, it already has it out of book there, but as you can see, you can kind of mess around with the courses you already have, or again, see what is good on the Lichess board here. So he goes e5. looks like b5 already gives black a slight advantage. I'm looking here and there, Scrooge. I'm looking here and there. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, like I said, Jordan, it's a lot easier when you're not studying for both the white and the black side of the pieces. I think that when you're just playing one game a week, especially for the classical time controls, like if you're playing the Lone Wolf League or if you're playing in the Lichess4545 League, like you're just prepping for one color, so that's I feel like that's a lot easier and a lot more manageable. And then you could focus on, let's say, if I know I'm playing white this week, if you don't really you could put all your focus on the white side of the pieces, and then if you flip flop to black the next week, then you can save some of these. Like I said, if you build out your own little opening prep, you can almost build your own book of openings and lines that you like on Chessable. So that's the nice thing about the private courses. Yeah, I have it on my second screen, man. Sorry, just to keep things decluttered. So yeah, exactly, Michael. Especially like because your opponent, like I said, my opponent's prep already ran out. Like I'm all out of games if after b5 here. Like so, anything after this is kind of on me to do my own research on. But I at least know my opponent's out of prep. I'm gonna feel comfortable after checking it on Lichess. I know I'm gonna have a slight advantage. There's gonna be times where your opponent consistently plays what's considered possibly like a blunder or a bad move, giving you a bigger advantage. And that's what you're really looking for. Like you're not looking to win the game from move one to the end of the move. And even some of my prep, like you're just trying to get comfortable positions. So when you get to the game on whatever day you have it scheduled, at least those first, let's say 8 to 10 moves is very it saves you some time. You're not wasting a lot of time out of the opening. Maybe it allows you to get an extra 10 minutes on the clock, especially with the 45-45 league. Every move you can make somewhat quickly is 45 seconds to a minute. So if you can make the first 10 moves fairly quickly, you might be able to have an opening time advantage heading out of the opening. Yeah, so pretty much use the combination of the analysis board on Lichess as well as any free or purchase chessable courses to create some favorable opening lines. Again, just create a private prep, and then like I said, if you're just playing one color, so this is mainly for the Lone Wolf and 45 League, keep it to 4 to 5 lines. So for the white stuff here, I would probably prep for a couple lines in the Evans and then a couple lines against the Sicilian. And then study these. If you're playing with the team event, and obviously everyone's on the Slack as well, you could easily ask some people to play some practice games if you were really gung-ho about it. If you don't have time for practice games, then, like I said, just using Chessable to study like once a day. Where can you go wrong? I think having too many lines is definitely a wrong move. So like trying to over prep for your opponent. They're depending on their level of seriousness, they're obviously going to do some prep against you as well. So we don't want to like burn ourselves out throughout the week. Again, like 4 to 5 lines that you kind of understand. I personally like using opening tree. You can use Lichess to. There is a way where you can input your opponent's name in here and look at their stats here, but I think it's important to not waste time studying stuff that, like, if let's say your opponent's never played e4 before, has like 800 games of d4, and all of a sudden whips out e4 on game day. Well, they just out prepped us. Like, good for them. But really focusing your studying on stuff that your opponent's played recently, and I would say focusing on the first 8 to 10 moves, and then just prepping it. Obviously, if you don't study those lines, like you could prep all this stuff on day one. Let's say you do this all on Monday. That's usually a good time to do it. Like I have my board back here. Round 2 for Rapid. I'm expecting Evans on Scotch, and then a Carl Khan and Slav. Like obviously, unfortunately for this opponent, playing both the Carl Khan and the Slav, like that's a lot more work to practice against. Most people stick to 1e4 or 1d4. and you can really hone in your study on like those sorts of openings. With this opponent specifically, it'd be a little bit more time invested in my black repertoire. I personally don't play against Stockfish. I'm part of like I'd either train with either people on the Slack community, or I'm a part of the Discord community for International Master Mark Esserman, master of the guy that wrote the book for Mayhem in the Mora. Again, and so some of those guys on there are really strong players, and I would just play some blitz games just to get comfortable with maybe those, again, first 10 to 12 moves. Even players, should try to come up with something. Yeah, I mean, Michael, they definitely could. That's why I'm saying don't go like overboard in like your opening prep. We're not trying to look for 15 to 20 moves deep on our opponents. We're really trying to look for that first 10 to 15 moves. Like if he looks at my games, like I'll put in my own moves. So like this is also another thing. Gospel Gambit. Like you can use this same opening prep to see what it looks like. Like if my opponent was to look at me at my white games, you could use it to kind of see like, all right, what is my opponent going to see if he looks up all my games? And he's going to see like he plays 1e4. Like, all right, 1e4, and if I play e5, I religiously play knight f3. So like this is someone that has like a dedicated opening repertoire like myself. If he plays knight c6, I play exclusively bishop to c5. So this is where you can kind of try to find your edge. Like if you have an opponent that plays kind of like me, I guess, you could look for, okay, let's say we go for the F, like he plays here. I could look, if I was my opponent, I would look to see what, maybe I haven't played against the Evans Gambit before as the black side of the pieces. But obviously there's a lot of different options. I would look to see what maybe I do very poorly against. So I've faced bishop d4 twice. Like I don't think it's actually a good move, but I think I did. But I've obviously gone 50-50 against it. Like yeah, it's just a bad move. But clearly I've blundered whatever. One game, won another. So I could try to decide to go for maybe a declined line if I haven't seen, like, all right, my opponent hasn't played against a declined variation of that often. Obviously he's got a lot of practice against the accepted. This is where I think you're going to find your opening edge, is when an opponent has a more of a dedicated opening repertoire. So and then against like here, I exclusively play the Scotch Gambit. So like you can kind of follow my lines very I play my lines kind of very religiously, again, like because that's what I'm studying, and I don't have to worry about usually opponents prepping against me in the and just like online random rapid games. So like here I would probably, okay, well this is the main line, and then this is also the main line. So I'm obviously doing kind of poorly in the main line variation of against the Scotch Gambit. At least, I mean, it's a very small sample size, so we don't have a lot to go off of. I mean, obviously in the Scotch Gambit I'm doing well, like super well overall, but this is what I would be looking for, like if I'm looking for an edge as black. Like, all right, queen e7, well that's just a bad move. Like you just gotta look here, like knight e5 right away, or knight e4 right away is a bad move. Okay, like what's going on here with d5? And you can kind of start building your opening prep like that. Same thing, obviously, with like the black pieces. Like I exclusively play the Caro-Kann, and I exclusively play the Slav now. So the Caro-Kann obviously can go in like a bunch of different directions, whether it's the traditional Caro-Kann, the advanced variation, all sorts of variations. So you could look up at my black games. If we switched here, and you could do the exact same thing and see like which version of the Caro-Kann is my worst to play against. So that's what I would kind of do. So like this isn't going to work for every opponent that you see every week, but it at least gets your mind ready to kind of go like once it gets to game day. So, and I would say most people aren't going to completely change up their opening repertoire. So So I'm doing bad against apparently bishop c4, even though I'm pretty sure that's a bad move. But things like this can really, or not black. I'm black in this situation, so I'm doing well actually. Uh, so against d4, I'm actually not doing too hot against the d4 straight up. But then here's where, okay, so against the exchange variation, I'm struggling against the exchange variation. As white, maybe I take the game in the exchange variation. Knight to d2, that's going to be a Tartakower variation. So this is where you're going to get those kind of ideas of what you want to bring to your game that week. So it should be the inflection points, and that's why it's so important about knowing what your baseline opening repertoire is. So bishop c4, d4. Exactly, craziness. So this is like where knowing your opening prep is going to be at least your baseline opening prep, and then that's where you can kind of tweak it from there. So, like I said, if I know I'm an e4 player, I know I'm going to face the Carl Khan. Okay, from here I can play an exchange variation more than likely, and that's where you're going to get your edge is kind of going here. And who knows, maybe your opponents started studying more and started looking at lines here and there, but this is kind of what we're talking about. And we're already not that many moves in. Like, obviously, the Carl Khan can take many different jumps by move 3. Other openings like that, the Evans Gambit, have a lot of different turning points from like move 4 or 5, depending if they accept it, decline it, and even if they do accept it, where they move the bishop afterwards once it gets attacked. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Again, find who your opponent is, see what color you are. I suggest scheduling your games later on in the weeks if possible. It gives you time to prep. Use resources such as Lichess.org for their free analysis board, as well as, if you want to, you can put in players' names. So, again, we were looking at my opponent plays he plays this, and I can see, again, I would want to look at a really good player who plays white. Well, Master Mayhem, an international master, what does he play against the 1e4? Or, what is this? 4 e5. Okay, it looks like he can play f3 or c4. I could play through his games and kind of get an idea of what is good. So if you have players that you kind of look up to in certain openings, you can find what they play against and go from there. So we have Lichess.org, openingtree.com. This I like a little bit more than specifically down here because it shows me when they've last played certain moves. So I can know, do I need to study that really? Do I not need to study that? If they've learned it a while ago, doesn't necessarily mean they've forgotten how to play that move, and they might bring it up in your game. But most people play what they're comfortable with, I would say more often than not. We use that. And finally, Chessable. Like, Chessable is great. I'm pretty sure with the free version, you can create your own courses. You just can only have 4 or 5 active at once. Create your own course and use these lines from your analysis board and from opening tree in order to put these in there. Like I said, I had 5 lines against my opponent Alex Gull from the last rapid game. And I just, you just do it once or twice a day for those 3 or 4 days leading up to it. And study, profit. If you have the time, I would say grab a partner to go play. If you're in other Discords, Slack groups, your teammates, then grab them and ask them if they're down for it. You can just play some blitz games. It doesn't have to be crazy like rapid games for just do casual games and say, hey, I want to practice this prep. Can you play this line? See if you remember it. If you don't remember it, vice versa. So that's my lowdown, guys. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. This should be saved to my live tab on my YouTube page, so you guys can always check that out. Message me if you have any questions of getting stuff set up, whether it's opening tree or Chessable, things of that. And hopefully this, guys, helps you like going into this next league. I love the Lichess4545 League because you get to prep for your opponent. I think that's just a cool thing that most players don't really get to do. Like, you kind of get to see that in like the World Championship matches. High level chess players kind of know who they're playing against, so they can do opening prep because they're playing the same people over and over again. But when you're just playing in the random the Lichess pool, like you don't really get a chance to really try to prep for an opponent and try to outplay them in the opening game. So if you guys enjoyed this, please drop a like, subscribe too. Hopefully I do some more of these like instructive videos on different aspects of chess that you can bring to your games on opening or on Lichess4545 League. As always, stream my games as well and register for the next upcoming league. Thanks for stopping in, guys.